Despite the negative criticism FixyText receives, I would call myself a FixyText apologist. Yes, it is far from the best game in the Jackbox Party Pack 10, but it has fantastic presentation and it's still an alright game to play if you already have the pack open. That being said, the critiques this game receives are absolutely justified. Even though it hasn't been much of a problem on my end, the game's current system of updating the global text box on the host screen doesn't always get everyone's words on the final text. If there's a lot of activity on the text box, it can sometimes take ages to update to the final text. The core gimmick of texting as a specific role from the game's initial pitch was reduced to a suggestion button, and my personal biggest critique, the game doesn't really evolve from the structure of the first round, which was something that was also going to be combated in the initial pitch but was scrapped in the final version. Though there's another problem that I thought was worth pointing out, and something I've been skeptical of since the demo of FixyText first released. And if you paid attention to my later content, I'm sure you already have a good guess as to what that is. That's right, I'm going to be talking negatively about the scoring system of a Pack 10 game again. Fortunately for FixyText, the problem is a lot more simple than something like the atrocities of Hypnotorious. In fact, if you regularly play this game with max players, you won't even notice it, and it only really becomes a major problem in a couple specific scenarios. So to get you caught up, I'll spend the next few minutes explaining the in-depth workings of FixyText's scoring system, then I'll explain what the main problem with it is, and finally, what I did to fix it. You ready? Too bad, let's go. In FixyText, everyone shares the same scoring system, which eventually gets altered in a couple specific scenarios. So for now, let's first analyze the base scoring system everyone shares. To start off, when the voting phase begins, all the writing players await votes from the remaining players in the game uninvolved with the creation of the text, unless you're playing FixyText with 3 players only, in which case everyone can vote on other players' words they didn't contribute to. Either way, once all the votes are in, players receive points based on a few different criteria. At base, the value of a single vote on a word you contributed to is worth 1,000 points, but this value gets divided by the total number of authors on the same word, meaning if you wrote the whole word yourself, you get the full value of a vote, but if a word has 2 authors attached to it, the base vote value is divided by 2, and so on and so forth. That being said, if you contribute to a word with more than one author, then you'll be eligible for a co-author bonus. Co-author bonuses give you a one-time fix of 900 points for every unique word with multiple authors that you have contributed to and has received at least one favorite vote from the voting players. Keep in mind, you will only ever earn one co-author bonus on a single word, regardless of how many favorite votes it receives, but you can receive multiple co-author bonuses if multiple words that you co-authored receive at least one vote, which is why you can reach a higher co-author total in a round. Finally, if there are any audience members in your game, they get to vote on their favorite words like normal. The difference is, rather than directly affecting the player's voting tally, all the audience votes are tallied separately, and the game will determine which player received the most audience votes. The player that receives the most audience votes will be given a one-time audience bonus of 900 points. However, in the rare event that the audience manages to reach a tie, the audience bonus will automatically go to the first player listed in the group. First come, first served, I guess. Now, that's the scoring system for FixyText at its base value, but there is one slight problem that arises when you're playing with a lobby of either 5 players or 7 players, and that problem is balancing. Let's talk about it. Now, about this balancing issue. You see, when you start a game of FixyText with 5 or 7 players, naturally you're going to be divided into uneven group sizes. When this happens, the smaller group will have more opportunity for points when it's their turn, since more people will be voting than writing. Conversely, this is a disadvantage to the large group when it's their turn for the inverse reason. So what does FixyText currently do to tackle this issue? Well, unlike Hypnotorious, FixyText actually does make an attempt to solve this problem. When you're playing a 5 or 7 player game of FixyText and the game detects that the larger group has just finished their text and is awaiting votes, the game will automatically apply a 1.5x multiplier to every favorite vote that the writing players receive. In a 5-player game, this balances out perfectly, and each player has the same maximum point total they can earn from favorite votes. 2 problems with this. Problem 1. This multiplier never updates based on the number of both group sizes in an odd player game, meaning this multiplier that previously balanced the 5-player favorite voting system ends up becoming an entirely different problem for 7-player games. The reason the 1.5x multiplier works in a 5-player game is because 1.5 is the direct result of dividing 3 by 2, the group sizes you get in a 5-player game. But in a 7-player game, the group sizes become 4 and 3. 4 divided by 3 is 1.3 recurring. This means that rather than leveling the playing field for both groups in a 7-player game, the 1.5x multiplier ends up giving the 4-player group a 12.5% favourite vote advantage in a 7-player game. But believe it or not, that's not the issue I'm most concerned about. If you've been paying attention, you'll notice that during this segment I've been talking exclusively about the point values of favourite votes. That's because, problem 2, co-author bonuses are not affected by this balancing method at all. Meaning the smaller group is always going to have the advantage on co-author bonuses because there are simply more individual votes going towards the smaller group, meaning there are simply more individual chances that a unique co-authored word will receive a vote, thus giving the smaller group more chances to receive unique co-author bonuses. In most cases, that error alone gives the advantage back to the 3-player group in a 7-player game, and in all cases gives the 2-player group in a 5-player game the points advantage back. By a significant margin, might I add. Still don't believe me? Well, let me reinforce my point using the power of mathematics. For this next phase, I'll be calculating the maximum points each player can receive in 5 and 7-player games of FixyText based on their group size and comparing them. But first we need to calculate how to maximize a single vote. The base value of one single vote on a word with one author is 1000 points. Good start, but we could go further with this. If this vote is given to a co-authored word with 2 authors, then the value of the base vote is halved to 500, but can give the authors a 900 point co-author bonus, giving us a net profit of 1400 points. So that's how we maximize the value of one vote. Keep in mind, co-author bonuses do not stack on the same word, so to reach the maximum possible score you can earn in a round, every vote you can possibly receive needs to go to a completely unique word that you contributed to and has exactly 2 authors. Juggling this criteria from anywhere from 14 to 28 individual votes is a massive ask and is pretty much statistically impossible in a standard setting, but nevertheless this is how we can calculate the maximum points you can receive in a round. So let's create a formula. Since we want a co-author bonus on our words with the lowest number of authors possible, we'll halve the base value of a vote to 500. This number will be multiplied by the favourite vote multiplier if applicable, and next we'll add 900 to what we have currently. And to finish off this formula, we'll multiply everything by 7 multiplied by the number of currently voting players. And that's our final formula. Ignoring the 900 point audience bonus, which can just be added onto the final equation like so. So, now that we have this formula, let's run this formula for one player in each group size in a 5-player game and a 7-player game, then we'll put them all on a graph and discuss our findings. Speaking of graphs, anyway, one look at this graph should make it very clear that in an odd-playered game, the smaller group always has the advantage. I mean, I would hope that message was clear before I did all this statistic stuff, but here's the proof in the pudding. Obviously, there isn't much to say here, the graph sort of speaks for itself, but I will provide a couple more numbers while we're here. Firstly, ignoring audience bonuses, the smaller group in a 5-player game has a maximum point total that is 6,300 points higher than the larger group in a 5-player game, a 27.27% advantage, both the 2 and the 7 recurring. That's pretty significant. Again, this graph is based on impossible voting standards, but the difference is still noticeable in a standard game of FixyText. Moving on to the 7-player game, the difference between both groups in a 7-player game gives the smaller group an advantage of 4,550 points, or 13.13%, both the 1 and the 3 recurring. Again, the graph is based on impossible voting standards, but the difference is still noticeable in a standard game, and if you really care about the audience bonus, then that just adds 900 points to every bar and changes the advantage percentage by 1.02% and 0.33% respectively. Pretty insignificant, but it's a difference nonetheless, therefore I have the responsibility to address it to you all. So that's our balancing problem explored in depth. Relatively simple, but noticeable when playing the game casually. So what did I do to fix this? Well, the answer is really simple actually. So I'll spend the rest of my time walking you through a mod I made in an attempt to fix yText. Despite how much of a ruckus I've made about this balancing issue, the solution is actually really simple. Rather than giving the larger group a points multiplier based on a constant number, I've simply made it so that the multiplier for the larger group is calculated in real time by dividing the number of writing players by the number of voting players. And it works really well. This means that in any non-3-player scenario where the group sizes aren't even, a multiplier is applied to the larger group that is directly based on the size of both groups. Odd player game? Boom, larger group gets a dynamic multiplier. Messing around with the group size developer controls? Boom, larger group gets a dynamic multiplier. Hell, with the debug controls changing the group sizes manually, you can make the teams 5 against 2 and everyone's maximum point potential would remain the same. And guess what? This dynamic multiplier system applies to co-author bonuses as well. And maybe even the audience bonus? No, actually. Each group can earn the same amount of audience bonus points anyways, so I don't really have any problems with how it's implemented currently. Apart from the fact that it could do with a little buff, but even then I don't really think it's that much of an issue. And yeah, that's our new and improved balancing system. And just to rub it in a little more, here's another graph. It speaks for itself, really. I mean, it's a perfectly balanced graph and therefore a perfectly balanced scoring system, right? Well, don't get me wrong, it's very close, but I need to address this very small nub at the top of the red bar of the 7-player game. That is the margin of error. It would look more like a standard shape for a margin of error if it was a more significant number, but nevertheless, this is the result of a very small compromise I had to make when developing this mod. You see, when using the dynamic balancing on a 7-player game, the large group gets a multiplier of 1.333 recurring. That multiplier itself works just fine, but the problem is that rounding points up or down simply must happen for every individual vote rather than the total, simply just because of how the game's point engine works. This means when multiplying the value of a favorite vote by 1.333 recurring, rounding has to take place. To be more specific, the larger group of a 7-player game will be getting favorite vote values like 1,333.3 recurring, 666.6 recurring, 444.4 recurring, and finally 333.3 recurring. Since each individual vote has to be rounded up or down to an integer without decimals, naturally the repetition of this rounding will produce inaccurate results for 7-player games. For every 3 votes you receive that end with 0.3 recurring, you'll end up with 1 total point less than you should. Conversely, for every 3 votes you receive that end with 0.6 recurring, you'll end up with 1 total point more than you should. And finally, for every 9 votes that you receive that end with 0.4 recurring, you'll end up with 4 total points less than you should. At maximum, the highest number of favorite votes a member of the larger group can receive is 63. If we multiply 63 by 4 over 9, our most effective point multiplier to lose points from, we get a total losing error margin of 28 points per game. Now if we multiply 63 by 1 over 3, our most effective multiplier to gain points, we get a total gaining error of 21 points per game. Meaning at maximum, a member of the larger group at the end of a 7-player game can lose out on 28 points, or, on the other end of the spectrum, gain a maximum of 21 extra points due to rounding errors. This does unfortunately mean that while the 5-player games are virtually perfectly balanced now due to my improved system, the larger group of a 7-player game still has a very small disadvantage. Now, is this a big problem? Absolutely not. The maximum points these groups in a 7-player game can theoretically receive is 117,600 points without an audience, and 120,300 points with the audience. 28 points of error isn't going to do much, even though most players are only likely to receive a third of the maximum points possible. And I'll ask you this, have you ever seen a tie in this game? Like, at all? I wouldn't think so. There's simply too much variation in vote values to completely tie with someone in this game. It would be a statistical miracle in a casual scenario. Besides, this rounding error is a problem you're bound to see in a game of FixyText anyways, as long as there's at least one group with 3 or more players. And the base game will only ever round down. Think about that. Anyway, the reason I bring up such a small error is to remind you all that even though I'm the guy that analyzes Jackbox scoring systems and gets mad at their balancing sometimes, expecting me to be the beacon of perfect balancing simply isn't a mindset you should subscribe to. Even though statistically speaking my balancing method for this game is almost perfect, 9 times out of 10 that doesn't mean it couldn't be improved upon in some way. Maybe it simply can't be perfect. So I don't want to advertise this mod as the perfect balancing system, because it isn't. But it's pretty damn close, am I right? And that should be everything about the dynamic scoring system. Is it cool? Let me know. But enough about the inner workings. How about I move on and show you how this balancing system has been implemented, as well as showcase the other things that I've added to FixyText. This dynamic scoring system has been implemented in the form of 2 settings in the gameplay tab. One for favorite votes and one for co-author bonuses. For each one, you can choose to keep it on dynamic, try out static multipliers you would expect from 5 and 7 player games, or you can just turn balancing off if you really wanted to. The main purpose of adding these settings is mainly for A, testing purposes, and B, if you ever wanted to revert to the old behavior of FixyText balancing on the flick of a dime. But realistically speaking, I don't think I'll ever be switching these settings back from dynamic anytime soon. And that's it for balancing, really. That's not the end of the showcase though. There's a couple of things I've added to FixyText that I'd still like to show off. these being some all-new character limit settings. The first setting allows you to decide whether or not you want the character limit of each writing player to be based on a sum total that's divided among the writing players, or an individual number that gets given to every writing player regardless of group size. By default, the character limit of a FixyText text is a sum total of 320 that gets divided among all the writing players, but with my new settings you can change that. In these number settings, where you can adjust the character limit for both systems, many numbers were chosen deliberately for a couple reasons, while others are just there for extra options. These settings were actually a result of a commission from one of the moderators of the Jackbox University Discord server, link in the description, which would be used as part of the next event at the time, fan-made question/content night, which I had quite a large role in. So thanks to him for suggesting the idea. And just for fun, I might even throw a custom episode into the mix. Not sure if I'll cover it on the channel, but hey, all the more incentive to download my mod. And that should be everything. I'll see if I can get this mod localized in at least one version of Spanish, because that would make the mod all the more accessible. I'd try for the other languages, but I don't have many ties to Jackbox fans that speak European languages other than Spanish. But hey, a man can dream. Anyways, thanks for stopping by. Now you know about FixyText's small but noticeable balancing flaws, and you've let me advertise to you a mod that aims to fix them. The link for the mod should be in the description, and I hope you enjoy it. This has been quite a fun journey, and a great modding opportunity to test the waters of balancing before I actually have done some modding work for Hypnotorious recently, particularly learning the spaghetti-looking flowchart system that is TalkShow. None of which has been balancing related so far, sorry, but rest assured, at least one issue I brought up in my Hypno video has been fixed, and I'll give you one more clue. If you like my older gameplay videos, you'll love what I've been cooking up. But that's all the hints I'll give you. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you on the flip side. Take care everyone, and remember to fix that balance of yours. Holy moly, it's finally done. My second video essay is out. Thank you all so much for being so patient with me. I'm so glad I could finally get this video out. I was actually hoping to get this video out around 2 months earlier, but life just kept getting in the way over and over and over again. Would you believe me if I said I started working on this video in April? Also, I've just recently been accepted into the YouTube Partner Program, which means I can eventually earn real-life money from my YouTube channel. Currently, I'm not eligible for ads yet, so enjoy that grace period while you can, but now you can donate to my channel using the Super Thanks button down below, and if you guys want me to, I can add a join button for you guys to get access to member-only perks. Let me know in the comments what you would want to see out of a join button on my channel. Seriously, I'd love to use it, but I don't have many ideas for it just yet. Anyways, I guess this video now cements my reputation as the balancing guy, and while I am very much happy with that title, I suppose that means it's time I put all my content creation expertise into a different topic next time, so be on the lookout for that. Who knows what I'll do next? Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the flip side. See ya!